The best way the language access plan has improved the New Jersey courts has been the increased quality of the interpreting and translation services that we provide. When I was a young lawyer, it was not unusual for folks to be grabbed off the street, basically, to provide interpreting services. We now have a cadre of professional interpreters who are assigned to the courtroom and who provide tremendous service. And what it does, it ensures that litigants can participate in their court proceedings and have an understanding of what's going on and not feel bewildered and lost, as was the case years ago.
No one comes to court for happy things. There's always a conflict, whether it's family, criminal, civil. The only real happy things I do are adoptions at the end or marriage. So they come thinking about that. They're stressed. It's a foreign environment to them. There's tons of people. There's all sorts of different activity they may never have been experienced in their life. And in addition to all that, they have either the language barrier or the hearing barrier. Then once they're here, we speak a different language, not only literally, but our words are different. What we refer to commonly, they've never heard that word before. I mean, I shared that I've been in the civil division, the family, and today's my second day in the criminal division. I literally have to learn the jargon. I have to learn the words that we use in each division, and I'm the judge. I mean, I just came from family. A PSA in family means a property settlement agreement. PSA in criminal is a completely different thing. So when I went from my initial training, they're talking about PSAs, and I'm wondering, why do they have a PSA about property in criminal? Hello, it's something different. So there's that added barrier. So this just provides a way for us all throughout the state to address these folks and ensure that we can properly serve them, to communicate at the core, to be able to communicate effectively with them at every stage of their interaction with us. Because without it, we can't do our job simply.
But it certainly is in line with our core principles of integrity, access, fairness, and quality service. It's important to make sure that everyone can participate fully in proceedings, and I do see that as part of the language access program. So I do believe that despite New Jersey having great diversity, we are promoting access and fairness through the language access program.
The plan is important so that folks have access to the courts. It's important that they be able to come to our courts both on the state level and municipal level and be able to have their grievances discussed, handled, and resolved in a way. And without an access plan, without the ability to converse or understand what's going on in your particular language, again, you are hindered and prejudiced in presenting your case and going forward. So it's of critical importance that we have these plans and that they are in place and that we're constantly refining them and improving them as the language diversity continues to expand in this state.
It's critical. I mean, and I think New Jersey's always been at the forefront of addressing this issue because of our diversity. It demands it. Being in Hudson County, I mean, I'm looking out the window, the high school down the street. After the last census, Jersey City, they indicated that 75 different languages are spoken in our high schools. So you have all these people coming to our doors, and we should be able to serve them. And you serve them by being able to communicate with them. And this plan helps you formulate the way to do it, because it's not easy. It sounds simple. It's, all right, let's just get the interpreter in or do whatever. It's not necessarily that easy.
New Jersey is the third most diverse state in the nation. Over 30% of New Jersey residents, that's about 2.5 million people, speak a language other than English at home. So it's obvious that unless we have consistent language access plans in place, a large percentage of our population is not going to have the same access to the courts and be able to participate meaningfully. But what's interesting is that we have about 87 different languages that we have provided interpretation services for. So clearly this is not just one or two languages. It is a very diverse population that we need to serve.
The biggest challenge, particularly here in Middlesex County, is you have sub-dialects of languages. You may have a Spanish-speaking country, but within that country there may be populations that speak particular dialects, and it's hard to find people. I've had that experience in the years that I've been on the bench, trying to find somebody who can speak the particular dialect in order to provide that person service. And that's particularly important in criminal cases because you want the person to have an understanding of what's going on. One case in particular, we had to use a translator from California over the phone because of the dialect that he spoke of a Colombian language that was not otherwise accessible here in the New York metropolitan area, which was surprising considering where we were located. But it took our language coordinator did the research, and she found the person in California, and we were able to provide the service. So kudos to her effort to make sure that folks had access to a language that they can understand and comprehend what's going on.
I think the current challenges, first and foremost, is educating the public and letting them understand that this is available to them, what we need from them when they come in. I mean, and it's something that even English speakers need to know. They need to know they just can't come in with, oh, how many times do I have someone at the counsel table pick up their phone? Look, Judge, look at what they said to me on the phone, or look at this picture on the phone. Everyone needs to understand, particularly in today's environment where there's so many pro ses, where there's so many non-English speakers or other folks who are maybe challenged that way, that the rules still apply. So you still have to kind of conform to them. So you have to give them, which leads into my next constraint or challenge, the time, one, to educate themselves. They may appear the first time, you may not be able to properly introduce into evidence what they want to show you, so you have to give them the time to correct that, because that's the only way you can properly serve them.
Even in the Spanish language, there are different countries, Spanish-speaking countries, that use particular words in different ways. And depending on how that word is interpreted, it may have a tremendous impact on what is being said or understood. So it's important that our translators and our interpreters, and they do understand that each country has a particular idiomatic expression, as it were. So that the same way, if people in the South may say things differently from people in the North, different folks speak different types of Spanish in the Caribbean, in South America, or in Central America. So it's important to have someone who comprehends that, understands that, and is able to adapt to that and provide accurate translation and interpretation to the court.
As I said, 87 different languages. We need to keep up on the changes in the diversity and the makeup and the population of New Jersey, but continued quality commitment, a commitment to ensuring that particularly with those languages other than Spanish, for example, I believe that in 2014 there were 85,000 court events that utilized language interpreters. 85% of those were Spanish. But clearly with the other languages, ensuring that we have competent interpretation is a challenge. Also, it's a challenge to keep training new court service personnel and new judges as they come on the bench to ensure that we are employing best practices so that everyone is working in uniformity.
It certainly reinforced my commitment to serve the public and try to do the best job I can, but it's also made me sensitive to how complicated it is to even get to the point where you can hear them, and how complicated the process is, and how many people are involved in just getting everything in place in order to get to whether it's a final hearing or the initial hearing or whatever the case may be, or getting the right paperwork filed or anything of that nature. A simple issue, let's say in a summary proceeding where there's not an exchange of discovery beforehand so everyone knows what's going on. No, you're coming in and on that day you're presenting whatever it is. Let's say it's a domestic violence type of case and the person gets up and says, well, I have all these texts he or she sent me threatening my life and confirming what I've been telling you. but it's in a different language. And we have constraints because you have to hear these cases in a certain amount of time, just for their sakes, for our sakes. So what do you do with this? If they had, mostly it's pro se, so if they had a lawyer, they may have printed them, had them translated so that they could properly be introduced. So one of the points the plan addresses is how to handle that. All evidence that comes into court should be in English, obviously. But in a situation like that, you want to try to address that at that moment. So we conferred and discussed it and implemented something where you would contact the interpreter, give the interpreter time privately to review it. If it's, they have to review it for the language. Is it something they can translate and interpret? If it's an audio recording, is it audible? So those sorts of issues. It sounds like a very simple thing walking in, but it's not. It becomes very complicated and time-consuming.
As a judge, I see the blank stare in the litigant's eyes between the time that I say something and the time that it's interpreted, and there is cognition on that part. And I think what it's made me do is recognize that blank stare in other litigants, even those not using interpretation services. And I think it has helped me to slow down and ensure that I am sharing things and explaining things. Even if I understand them, I need to understand that the litigant might take a little bit more time. So I think the use of interpretation services forces us to slow down and ensure that whatever language is being utilized, the litigant understands what the court is doing and why the court is doing what it's doing. Frankly, even though Spanish is my first language, I did not study the law in Spanish. So even for me, it is difficult to have a lexicon for certain legal proceedings. So can you imagine a litigant coming into the courtroom, even one for whom that language is their first language? They might not necessarily have a lexicon for the proceeding. So it's very, very important, I think, in terms of ensuring that we are treating everyone the same to provide interpreting services. I am very, very impressed with the Spanish interpreters because they have a vocabulary for the proceedings that even those judges that speak Spanish as a first language may not necessarily have unless they've been doing these proceedings for a long time. Obviously, we need to ensure that all of the languages are as competent. But we're very different than other states. Many other states don't provide language access services at all or charge litigants for language access, which is ridiculous because if you have to choose between paying someone to ensure that you get fair representation and not, many litigants will not have the resources.